Coach Massi here today from M2 Speed, Strength, and Performance. And I have my buddy Raj Chaudhry here, R-A-J. I can't spell Chaudhry. Welcome, buddy.
Good to see you.
Thanks for coming out. Raj is the creator of Synapse CCR, Synapse Custom Calibrated Resistance, correct?
That's right, yeah.
I would dissertate on it, but why don't you actually tell us a little bit about the product before I even get into my dissertation?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me today. It's great
pleasure.
to be here. Love your new space.
Thank
it's
you,
fantastic.
thank you.
So if you're in the area, come check it out.
Thank you.
So Synapse CCR was born. My background's professional tennis. I worked on the professional tennis tour. I happen to be in New York right now for that reason. That's why I get the privilege of coming to see you. And I started looking into research around eccentric loading, and I saw all these great benefits from eccentric loading, but was a little bit wary about it because of the safety issues around traditional ways that we eccentrically load. So I started tinkering with ways to do that, and Synapse was born out of that, which allows us to get maximal concentric, isometric, and eccentric loading, which is the thing that sort of separates it from most equipment.
Right. Now, Cal Dietz wrote a book on the phases of training, right?
Yeah.
So concentric, eccentric, isometric, which is normally performed separately, right? So it's a phase here, a phase there, phase there. And what I found interesting, I call it the tool. So around here, everybody knows I say, give me the tool.
The tool.
So
I like that.
what we did is we just didn't hone in on like, hey, it's eccentric loading and that's all we're doing. We very quickly progressed to, why would I just eccentrically load with this? I can get my eccentric, my concentric, my isometric inset once again. And it's such a versatile tool. And it's very, very small. And I know it's off frame, but why don't you just grab that? So before we even unpack it, we're just going to show you guys. Now, this is, stay tuned, right? This is the tools in here. This is a training system in here. And most of you know, if I don't believe in it, I do not use it. We have a space in our facility where it's the graveyard, right?
Yeah.
So we started using this, and from a creative perspective, I'd like to thank you because it's like writing another book. So are there limits to this? Should people use this to create, or should they just 5 simple movements and that's the end of the story? Where are we at with that?
Well, so in truth, at the end of the day, it's being used by a lot of different avenues, and some of them are using it for very thin slices of applications. Where I get excited, honestly, is when I get it in the hands of professionals like yourself that have a wide knowledge base and a lot of experience. I encourage that creativity, because if you understand what you're doing, the risk for injury is quite low with this piece of equipment, which is one of its big bonuses.
I would say non-existent.
You can't
say that. I would say non-existent. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah,
but
sure.
When you hit that inflection point, we're a do no harm industry, right?
Yep.
Which is interesting in the sense that you have to ride that threshold. Rarely do we come across a training item that is literally zero risk.
Yeah.
So when you say you have to work at it, yeah, I can't figure, I kind of like reverse engineer. How could I potentially hurt somebody with this?
Right.
I'm not there yet. Yeah. So continue, please.
Yeah, no, but so where this thing gets exciting, a lot of people will get it and they'll replace their bands or they'll just use it. And that's great. I mean, look, to be frank with you, if that's all you do with it, I would say, honestly, you don't need to spend the money on it. Where it gets special is where it can do things that we can't do with regular equipment. And when you put this tool in the hands of practitioners and professionals that have an understanding what they can do, the creativity that you can come with, it's fun. We get to brainstorm about how you use it, which is you're doing things that I hadn't thought of. And that's what I want to encourage, because that's where the real potential of the device is. It's like any other tool. You've got all kinds of great tools, and you got kettlebells, you got tsunami bars, right? You can, if you know what you're doing with those tools, you can create some incredible results, or you could just go the traditional path with them, right? So it all depends on how you apply the tool, but it does have some. The reason I made it a tool is because it offers the ability to do things that we can't do with the standard equipment.
It's a multi-tool.
Yeah.
It's a new Swiss Army knife in training, which is cool. And you mentioned a few things I'd like to also hit. Also, you said application. You also mentioned the price and creativity. So tell me about the price point, because we haven't even unpackaged it.
Yep.
Somebody sees this small bag, you're going to want to pull in a little bit more.
Yep,
This way so you're not off frame.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So you see this package, and not to make it an infomercial, and you're thinking, you know, what's going to be in this bag? So what's the price point?
So they start at $349.99, and they, you know, you can add, there's a couple add-ons. There's a door anchor that will allow you to hook up to any door and create any force vector that you want. And then there's an add-on for rotational strap that you can do a lot of rotational hip and shoulder movements. And so that's the price point for it. You know, you look at that, you think, oh, that might be a bit steep. When you look at what it offers, if you want to get something else that can offer the same stimulus, we're looking at the ballpark of minimum $2,000 plus.
Oh, I would say at least. And also, for the entrepreneurs watching this, did it only cost you $349 to engineer?
No.
Okay, so in understanding that it did, the R&D behind it, really, the bag is beautiful, by the way. I don't know whether you patented it or not.
We did design that in-house. Yeah, we're pretty happy with that.
Unbelievable packaging. We happen to take it on vacation with us.
Nice.
I never know what kind, you know, Maddie's behind the scenes. We never know what kind of gym there's going to be. So it's a solution for us.
Yeah.
But from the price point perspective, especially folks that are just getting in the industry, if they hear $349, they're immediately going to start to say, well, what else could I potentially buy with $349?
Sure.
$349 is a very small price to pay. And the reason I get hung up on price points and actually encouraging people to buy a particular product is the ROI on $349 is tremendous, okay? Some people will say, I can buy a sled, okay? Yeah, you can. Tell me what you can do with a sled. You need some plates, by the way.
Yeah.
So at $349, if you're getting eccentric, isometric, concentric, you're also getting, and we'll get into it when we get into the practical, segment holes in the eccentric. Segment movement through range in the concentric, and then firing up the CNS with the isometric. $349 is a very small price to pay. Now, if you're new in the industry, out of the bag, you have like some great videos out there as resources, right? On your platform?
On the website, on social, we're always adding to that catalog of things to do. You know, it's interesting that you bring this up, because one of the things that it's really hard to perceive that this is called Synapse CCR, and it stands for Custom Calibrated Resistance. So basically, what that means is no matter what your strength profile is, at any given movement, any given moment in your movement on the strength curve, it's going to match your strength. So whether you're talking about an 85-year-old grandmother or an NFL lineman, it's going to match their strength curve for the whole time, up to 660 pounds of force. So inside that bag is 660 pounds of force that if you have a stable anchor point, you can load somebody at levels that you actually can't achieve with traditional resistance. And so that's one of the reasons why it becomes a versatile tool, because it can load you with 2 pounds of force if you're in rehab and you're just coming off of surgery, or it can load you to your absolute max capacity. We got Matt off camera over here. I don't even want to know what he's pushing up eccentrically on a single leg lunge.
Yeah, he's got some stuff. But you know, it's interesting. So you just talked about matching your force. You know, and a lot of people talk strength, and strength is kind of a bogus term, but we all know what it means. When you say somebody's strong, you know, they move some weight, they look like they're fit, they look like they're sound. We're really talking about force. And strength is actually maximal force. What's the maximal force that you can achieve? And in your iteration there, you've just told me that this can do what basically a whole rack of dumbbells can do. Because you talked about 2 pounds, you talked about up to 660 pounds. But here's an interesting point, and I picked it up when you started earlier in the conversation. You're not going to want to eccentrically load 660 pounds on a back squat. So in other words, I am not putting, first of all, I don't use rigid barbells anymore. You know that? We use the Tsunami bar. I'm still probably not going to put 660 pounds across somebody's back and say, okay, let's do an 8-second eccentric descent. Then we'll hold it with a little bit of an isometric at the bottom. If you can, it's not going to happen. They're going to collapse. So $349. Last time we mentioned price point. You're covering an entire array of dumbbells, plates, etc., and being able to do things that you cannot. And we work with NFL guys. Here's an example. Or sometimes things just happen in our industry. We're out. We have this with us. We don't have a gym at our disposal. A conversation will turn. Yeah. And the next thing I know, I have 660 pounds available to me in a bag.
Yeah.
And you as the creator, you need to generate sales. Sometimes people will think it's pitchy, you're trying to sell it.
Yeah.
You're like helping us. You're really helping the industry. So I thank you for that. But also you have a certification now, right?
Correct. Well, first of all, I appreciate you saying that. At the end of the day, we're running businesses. You know, we're all trying to make a living doing that. The real crux of this is the only reason it became a product is because it's offering us something that's a different stimulus than we get in standard gym equipment. And that's the only reason I said, okay, well, you know, this is interesting because this offers us ways to help people improve function. Maybe that means picking up their grandkid, you know, being able to do that for longer. Or maybe that means, you know, making an NFL team or being a breakout star. All of those things, we want to help people be better in their movements and be stronger and have better longevity. So that's the exciting part. In route to that, there is a learning curve. It's a different thing than we're used to because it breaks some of the rules that we have with standard resistance. And as a result, there's a little bit of a learning curve to it. It's not a steep one. There's a little bit of knowledge that you need to get around, and that's why we created certification courses around it, because we give people the ability to learn the basic principles. And believe it or not, as well versed as you are in the science around exercise physiology, eccentric training has kind of been under the radar a little because it's very difficult to practically implement. You know, like just like you said, if you're going to put 660 pounds on someone's back and have them eccentric load, the risk to reward ratio just isn't there. It just doesn't make sense. It's time consuming. You could create injury. So this allows us to have access to the benefits of that. And we'll talk about that. You know, you get longer muscle bellies. You recruit type 2B muscle fibers. You refine your central nervous system. Your connective tissues get more resilient because they see a higher load. So there's all these things that are really unique to that eccentric loading or even isometrics as well as, you know, as you use a lot. So we want to give people the opportunity to have a really good education around that so that they can then springboard and use their expertise and their history of practice to build on that and create things that are brand new to the industry.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is even if you just start simple, from my perspective, you run into boundless creativity with this. And I think what people in our industry need to know is this is still a young industry. As far as formalized strength and conditioning goes, it's pretty young. It's about 80 years old.
Yeah.
You know, it shows up probably only about 50 years ago in professional sports, you know? So we get trapped in a box, and it's not good to be trapped in a box. You should start to operate outside the box, right? So I say, and I get criticized for this a little bit, program outside the textbook, right? And that's my mantra. You know, and
that might be why we get along.
Yeah. And I say that science is only as reliable to the degree that we currently understand it, because we're not treating disease the same way we were 50 years ago. So science is fluid. I'm sorry. You know, people say science is science.
Yeah.
Science is fluid based on the degree of our understanding. So you also mentioned longevity. We call it healthy aging. And I think one of the really cool things about this is, you know, you hear, well, when people get older, they fall because they lose their balance, blah, blah. And actually, they don't fall because they lose their balance. They fall because they don't have eccentric control. So when someone can no longer step up over a bathtub, put their foot down, and eccentrically control their descent or get from the eccentric to the, that's why they fall. The reason older people fall when they're stepping down off a curb is because that requires what? Eccentric control. Which is why I tell trainers and coaches all the time, from the most rudimental perspective, do step-ups with your clients and have them control the eccentric portion of it. So now let's say a person can't even accomplish that step up. And here's a practical I can give you and thank you. We do have older clients that cannot make a stair. So if we try to put them on a 12-inch box step, they're not going to do it. So what's the natural regression? Well, you go down to a 6-inch. Well, what if that doesn't work? What's the next regression? You have them hold a TRX. You have them hold on to, push off a pole or a cane. I don't like that. So I said, nope, wipe that all out. Box is not even in play. Now I take this tool. I now build their eccentric. And they don't even realize they're able to do this because they, let's say they're assisted onto the 6-inch box, but stepping down is a horror show. They just go plunk. I say, no problem. We're not going to touch the box for 3 to 4 weeks. Put this in the protocol a couple of times a week. Next thing they know, they're up on the box and they can come down on a 1, 2, 3, and they say, what happened? Bang. So the contribution here is magnanimous. Now, tell me a little bit about there's going to be a lot of spaces where it fits. So it obviously fits into athletic performance. I don't know if bodybuilders understand, like you can legitimately change your muscle physiology with this, right? You can get a completely different look. Body composition. Anytime a product like this comes out that's so versatile, I get excited. But people say, what equals what and where does it fit? So let's start baseline. For a physical therapist, why should they have this?
So I'll answer that question and then I'll maybe take it a bit broader and give you like the overview of where it's being used. So for a physical therapist, in a lot of models for physical therapy, they're using multiple modalities to try and help somebody get better. They're doing manual work. They're doing, they might be doing STEM. They might be doing all these different modalities, which are all great and can contribute to the healing process. But then we want to consolidate that improvement with neurological control of the musculature in those ranges. And if we don't have that, we're setting ourselves up for further injury again or slower recovery. When we can load them in these eccentric loads, concentrically and isometrically as well, but particularly on the eccentric, oftentimes we can get circumstances where we get people to be able to handle loads that they wouldn't normally be able to handle in the therapeutic process. And because this always matches your ability level, a lot of times in a therapy session, you might say, oh, that's a little bit too much weight for me in this range. So we have put that one down and we go with the lighter weight, which means in the sticking point, we're going at the right intensity. But outside of that sticking point, we're way below the stimulus level for adaptation. With the Synapse, we're able to sort of lift and say, okay, this kind of hurts a little bit. We back up on the force. It's to the actual client that determines the force. They can get through that, and you'll find oftentimes the eccentric, they can load up a lot more, which gives us a higher degree of stimulus, which hastens the recovery process.
And instantaneous feedback. Feedback that you can make adjustments to on the fly. You don't have to hang a bar back up, take plates off, you can literally have a patient speaking, giving real-time feedback to the PT, and it's just backing off or giving more.
Exactly.
And you just spoke from that physiological neuromuscular perspective. So now I'm going to jump in on a business perspective because I'm on the advisory seats for our chiropractic and physical therapy partners. So we have a clinic right across from us. And physical therapists, I understand you can only bill for certain modalities. However, if you're building a business and you want to build your business to where it's bigger and better, what you want is better outcomes. And you want faster, efficient outcomes. So why not invest in something that's going to get you faster, more efficient outcomes, which will now serve the cycle of everybody says word of mouth. There's still a great value in word of mouth. So why not? A lot of the responses I have got about various tools across our partnerships. We have we deal with a balance mat, right? Force velocity mat. Some people don't want to spend $6,000-$7,000 on a mat. And I understand that. But there's a way to articulate why you should for objective measures. This is $349. This is live feedback. This is something where you're adjusting on the fly. And I think for PTs in this segment, they should really understand that this is going to pay for itself in many different ways. A, bill it as the modality you need to bill it, and B, ROI on your outcomes. Now, PTs, we just talked about.
Yeah, can I just add one last
Yeah,
point
absolutely. You add whatever you want.
Because from the PT perspective, one of the things that, if you talk to pretty much any therapist, they're trying to get somebody better as quickly as they can and as holistically as they can. One of the things that we run into is just time. You have time sessions, or you have you've got a schedule that you've got to keep.
15-minute increments.
Yeah, exactly. And so, until you actually experience this, it's very hard. It's hard to understand. When I say, give me 90 seconds on this for a certain movement, and you're done with that movement for 5 days. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds absurd. But when you understand that it's matching you through every phase of movement at your max capacity, you're able to create a stimulus that's valuable, because we know in physical therapy, one of the challenges is compliance, right? Go home, please do these exercises. Right. They come back, they may or may not have done them, right? Some of them are diligent, some of them are not. But if you send them out of your office with a stimulus that's going to last them for 3 or 4 days, that's actually doing work while they're recovering, and they come see you in another 3 or 4 days, you're actually making progress, whether they're compliant or not. Ideally, they are compliant, right? So that's just another addition. And that kind of speaks to this time concept, which is one of the biggest assets that you get in all of the categories that we work on.
And once again, from a business perspective, I mean, 349, if you're building a business out there, understand there will come a time where you spend $349 to take a few people to dinner, or to do a trade show, or to buy a sign, something like that. And this will segue into the athletic performance space. Same thing with you trainers and coaches. You are going to spend $400, $500, $600 at some juncture to bring a lunch, or to take somebody out, or to do a trade show, or to do the local this, or to sponsor the local that. What I like about this, and really, anything that's novel, you can get multiple people in a room at the same time and say, hey, check this out. Now you're different. Not everybody I hope everybody has this. And, when we get into the practicals, you'll see why we think there should be one on each rack. To do intraset. But tell me about the athletic performance space, everything from football to tennis to baseball, and where you've kind of been able to make some headway with this.
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate in the professional world. Tennis obviously is my background, so that's sort of my community. And, there's quite a few of the top level tennis players that are putting it into use. It's really fun. This has been a fun part of this project for me personally.
You just spent time at the Open, right?
Yeah, I've just at the U.S. Open. I was working with a player there, Bethany Maddox-Sands, somebody that I've known for a really long time. But so the fun part about this for me is actually the learning that I get to do. Because I'll go to coaches from a different sport and I'll say, look, I don't know anything about how you train as a basketball player. Like, that's not my world. Right. I know some things about training, but it'd be arrogant to say I know how to train a basketball player. I haven't lived in that world. So I want to rely on other people's expertise. So they tell me what's important to them as an athlete. What are the things they need? And then we start to build movements that are very specific to them. And so we go from strength training in the athletic world, activations and recoveries with them. So we have a protocol for Major League Baseball players. A shout out to Doug Latta at the Ball Yard. He's a guy that I collaborated with, and he's come up with literally a 3-minute warm-up where Major League pitchers are walking in the door. 3 minutes later, they're ready to throw at full capacity.
Yeah, I can see that.
And we come back to that time idea, right? So normally that takes them 15 or 20 minutes. So you think on a daily basis, we're saving 15 to 20 minutes for an athlete, for anybody in life who doesn't need a little more time on their hands, right? So, and their shoulders are holding up well. They're able to perform at high levels. So that activation recovery, pure raw strength. And then that last category is creating movements that help athletes understand movements that are critical to their sport. So we can set up really relevant movements to each athlete's sport, put them in them, load them a little bit, and let them understand internally. You probably know this better than I do, but as a coach, we're always saying, this is what I want you to experience. This is what this feels like when you're doing it the way we want to see it.
Right.
And when the athlete has an internal experience of that, they have a touchstone. And you can say, do you understand? I've had guys, there's a move for baseball players where the move to the plate, if they're a batter, we can suspend them and just let them feel every centimeter of that movement. Right. And I've had very high level baseball players say, my coach has been telling me to get in my glute my whole life. I never knew what they meant. I feel that now.
Well, you're talking about segment training, and that's been historically done on some very expensive machines or on bands.
Yep.
Right? Now, here's the issue with that. On an expensive machine that maybe is an isokinetic machine, you can't freeze frame it and make the application of force to make the user feel it. So if I have a baseball guy and he's having a problem dropping his hands and we're trying to keep his hands up a little bit, we could see that point at where he's just starting to drop his hands, apply that force, and then he'll say, oh, I feel that. So that's interesting. You also talked about something I'm highly interested in, because when we consult with outside teams, everything is time. And we are maximize time. You compress time. Now, how can you do that? Well, our body is nothing but a series of messages, right? So our DNA is information and gives our body messages. Our neuromuscular junctions are messaging. So just like we know with our tsunami bar work we do that you can speed up the rate of messaging, I feel as if your tool also compresses time, because you can now educate that rate of messaging to the point where you don't need a 20-minute warm-up. Now, some of the pushback on that for us has been muscle physiology is muscle physiology, and that's all there is to it. Well, let's look at the throwing, because you talked about throwing, right? And remind me to come back to sport-specific movement. So you said you got a 3-minute baseball warm-up. They're out there throwing full capacity. There's no injury reported as a result. Well, that's not how muscle physiology works. 3 minutes, that's got to be unrealistic. Well, you're not really painting the accurate picture. The accurate picture is if you're throwing to warm up, that's essentially a concentric movement with some eccentric deceleration or, negative acceleration, right? So now, because of this, the options, and I'm sure I don't even need to look at the warm-up, and I'm sure there is some sort of gradiated resistance in both the concentric and eccentric, both increasing and decreasing, right?
Yep.
And that's what speeds up the messaging and compresses the time. So tell me, if somebody's normally used to throwing for 20 minutes or doing a 20-minute warm-up, aren't you also taking reps off the arm?
That's a very nuanced point, and that speaks to obviously your experience in the field. Because if you're doing 100 reps to get ready, whether it be internal, external rotations, all the different combinations, that's really it's valuable, but it is reps on your arm, right? So if we can remove some of those reps and still get you ready to prepare your body to do what it needs to do, that's a savings of time. That's a savings of wear and tear on the arm, and long term, right? If you add that up, I said 100 is probably a little bit too many, but let's say you're doing 50 reps of everything combined with your bands to get ready. But then you have to go pitch. And then you go pitch, and then you do your cool down, and then that's another aspect of this recoveries. It's counterintuitive. When we get done with something, we actually heavily load just the eccentric. That tool allows you to do just the eccentric without a concentric load.
With that, right?
So we get to pull apart the muscle fibers, right? And one of the things, we'll go to this time thing, and I'll keep going down that route. Because we're allowed to match that strength curve the whole time, we're giving your body a stimulus. You know this, but just for everybody out there, it may not be common knowledge that we're substantially stronger on the eccentric phase of movement. So if I can lift 100 pounds, depending on my joint angle...
Because we don't want things to fall on us.
Exactly. And it's a good thing that we are that way, right? Because if I jump and I land, you have to remember, it's my body weight times 9.8 meters per second squared.
You don't want to crash to the ground, and if you're doing a horizontal bench press, you don't want things to fall on you.
Exactly. So it's a good thing that's a physiological fact.
Right.
But 30 to 70% stronger, depending on the joint angle, is a huge differential. Right. And we don't get to tap into that with regular resistance training. So with this, we get to tap into that. And so we lift at 100, and we get pulled down at, say, 150, 160. And because of that, we can condense the time it takes to gain strength. That's the stimulus that we're looking for. So I'll just give you the example of the pro tennis athletes that I worked with. We would dedicate about 3 to 5 hours a week off the court just for strength training. And I always call that the price of admission in professional sport. Right. It's like, you got to have it. If you don't do it, you can't last, and you will not be the best. but it's not the defining factor as to whether you win or lose. Your skill set is. I mean, it's an integral part of it, but you have to have it. But it does. If I'm 5% stronger, that doesn't mean I'm going to win more tennis matches. So we reduced that 3 to 5 hours to about 35 minutes a week. Sounds insane until you actually feel what this feels like. Now that freed up, so as a coach for me, this is where coaches plug in, because they're like, wait a second, I get 2 hours a week back with my athlete.
Yeah.
What could I do with that time to actually improve their skill set? Because that will impact winning and losing.
Now you can practice skill.
Right.
And what I also find interesting with this is I've not compromised skill. Some of the other routine measures, bands, etc., because there's such a lack of control through the range of motion, you can have somebody veer from an arm slot, and it's not great. And we were talking about reps. You know, we're all like, you know, a car needs an oil change, needs tires rotated. It's all about hours on the body, and then hours that you save from the body to do other things. So bands, you know, they have their place. They honestly do. However, if somebody's having difficulty in their arm slot, their arm angle, the last thing you want to do is have them get into a band and start moving through that and trying to correct that from a coach's perspective. And, you know, unfortunately in strength and conditioning, a lot of times we ride the line of skill. It's just a fact. So that's why we're plugged in with the team coach, the pitching coach, and say, hey, look, we're not going to have this guy throwing a ball. Send us some video. And he's like, look, this is what's frustrating us. I can't seem to get it done. You're not going to get it done at top speed. You have to step it back first. And that's where you can take them through ring. We'll even stand around with a pitching coach and say, tell me where. And, okay, there. Okay, let's hold him here now. You feel that? Fix this now. Now it's fixed. You're giving him feedback immediately. We would have people... One of the most common faults in athletic performance is in lateral movement, people will open their toe or they'll open their whole hip. And what happens when you open your entire hip? You're committed. So in some sports, if you're committed this way to make a tackle, perhaps, somebody's coming back that way. Or if somebody's going to cross you up, they're coming back where you're not, you know, you're committed one way, they're going to come the other way. So there were some standard fixes, Raj. You know, grab the bands, put them around the ankles. If that didn't work, then you'd have to put them on a highly expensive machine that's isokinetic. Now with this, it's literally, okay, strap this guy up. This right leg is driving me insane. And as soon as he goes to open the toe or open the hip, I apply that pressure, I apply that force. I say, see, that's what it's supposed to feel like. Don't move for 9, 8, 7, 6. And it's like, whoa, you know, it's sort of an explosion in the mindset. But tell me about, have you played around with speed at all with this? So when people start talking to me about speed on that, you know, one of the things I like to get clear on is that this is a tool like any other. It does have a lot of versatility, but it actually can amp up in its ability to help you when you pair it with other things. So, you know, people be like, oh, well, is this all I ever have to do? No, if you're training an athlete holistically, this is a really good component. But you should pair it with other things. One of the things I like to do for speed is actually, so one of the facts around eccentric loading, especially super maximal eccentric loading, is that your brain and your nervous system preferentially targets your type 2 or your type 2X muscles. These are what we call your fast twitch muscle fibers. And those are the ones that are responsible for sprinting, decelerating, all these explosive ballistic movements. So we want those as athletes. So if we're getting our brain to preferentially recruit those, we're targeting those. And they've shown that if you do super maximal eccentric loading over time, you can have, to what extent you're genetically capable, you can start to shift some of that fiber typing over to type 2B or type 2X muscle fibers. So one of the things I like to do with that is to do a very heavy, slow eccentric load to prime the nervous system, right? And then have them hop out and do something explosive. Prime. Great word that you use. So for speed, we use it as a primer.
Yeah.
But now let's go back, because I saw some of the PhD light bulbs go off. So you're talking about the type 2X muscle fibers.
Yep.
Are you saying that you're skipping past the other muscle fibers, or is it a gradiated or graduated response?
Great question. It's interesting. So anytime the brain does a eccentric movement, the brain will preferentially grab the type 2B fibers, right? It's not really skipping over, but there's a preference there to get to those. Now, when we're working on Synapse, because we're at max loads, the way we recruit muscles is pretty straightforward. So if I just lift my hand, it's not a huge tax to my system, right? And so I'm recruiting my type 1 muscle fibers. If I put a 5-pound weight in there, maybe I start to get into my type 2As. To get to my type 2Bs, I've either got to lift a very heavy weight or do it very explosively. Those are the two places I'm going to get into that, or eccentrically. So oftentimes, unless you're a high-level athlete, you're probably going to the gym, you're maybe not even touching those type 2B fibers, which are our most metabolically expensive fibers. And if you have a higher percentage of those as you get older, that's a good predictor of good longevity.
And you also get to those via velocity also.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
So,
with those ballistic, so when you go aggressively, right? So those are the ways that we get at it. And so when we're able to load those, and we do that eccentric loading, right? So we'll back up again, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to listen to this that know you, follow you, and understand a lot about the body. There might be some that don't know this. Most of the injuries that occur in athletics or in life occur on that deceleration phase.
Of course. Nobody
right?
gets hurt hanging in the air.
Yeah, and so when we're landing off a jump or changing direction, we're absorbing force and redirecting it. Those are the places where and what happens is a force occurs that's greater than our body can handle. And that's when we get a breakdown. So our job...
Which affects biomechanics.
Right? Yeah, and so our job is to set the biomechanical stage so that it's sound, so joints are in good positions, and have the capacity from the nervous system and the musculature that surround that to support those forces. So that's what we're doing in all training.
It all
really.
sounds like information.
Yeah.
It's all information.
And when you're doing, I love the example you gave just a minute ago where you got the guy turning and he's opening the hip and you hold him there for 10 seconds. You're literally sending the nervous system an information highway of messaging.
I'm writing code.
Right. That's
what
a great way to say it. That's a great way to say it.
No, I'm really trying to write code. And you talk about the muscle fibers. And listen, we all started out, right? We were all novice. We were all babies at one time. This language, learn the language. You have to learn to speak this language.
Yeah.
So, and you're talking about recruitment of the muscle fibers, and people say, well, physiology tells me I can't just skip over. There's some physiology says that, some science says that, there are other theories out there. But what I like to say is probably the most simplistic example I can give, and I think anybody, even novice, will understand rate of force development. Everybody understands the rate of force development curve. If it takes you, 3 seconds to go from 0 force to your maximal force, my goal is to make that take 2 seconds or less, right? So in the same way, with this tool, you're not necessarily bypassing. What you're doing is you're making that rate quicker, the rate to those muscle fibers. And that's hugely important. You use the word primes. We consider this the primer. So we have some very general movements. We'll also get into that for priming speed. And speed, we're talking about velocity. Speed's a scalar unit. We're talking about velocity. And I mean, man, where it's really helped us, you try to teach that 3-point takeoff for the combine or a pro day. They got to run their 40. Yeah. And oh my God, it's like, you can do something to help the guy. And you almost don't want to mess something up that's really good. So now you have to start, we have team meetings. How much are we going to mess with this guy's sprint technique, sprint mechanics, biomechanics? If we try to do something, getting him out of the hole and the takeoff, are we going to mess him up? And all I can tell you now is I can make him feel it. So I'm not always having to say, scream, ass higher, head down, arm lower, get me a hamstring quiver. That's really where we can now get them in a position, get this on them, maybe just on one quad, maybe on a back hip. However, there's ways we load this across the crotch diagonally, and we'll be on the backside pulling them in. It's like actually handling a large equine animal and trying to get them into position. So from a speed primer perspective, I'm going to tell you guys and girls out there, you can use this even for the takeoff, for the 40 setup, money. You could literally do an entire program with this.
So that's super fun to hear, because I've not actually seen. I can't wait for you to show me what you're up to, because and this is what's exciting is when people apply their expertise to the tool, and but some of those things are common threads that I've heard from a lot of different sports. Is I don't have to cue the athlete. They start to feel that within. They naturally get into positions that give them the best structure and the best force production. Like they do that instinctually, and that's so much fun when you don't have to over coach it, and it just kind of comes naturally, and then you reinforce it, and then they have a touchstone, so you can say, hey, you remember what that felt like when you're out on the field? Boom. Oftentimes, even on a tennis court, I'll take somebody, we'll be working on something for, say, their forehand, and they'll feel it on when we put them on the Synapse, because we can put that load on them, and they can feel what that connection to the ground feels like. They go out and hit a few balls, they're like, I don't quite feel it anymore. Boom. Get in there for 30 seconds, and then go back at it.
It's like life. You don't appreciate something till you feel it, right? And you said connection. So this is, we'll take a break after this. We've been going a bit. Connection. Anybody out there who has even the most simple video analysis software will now be able to get somebody in a position and utilize dots and connecting points to actually illustrate not just a move. You know, these video analysis software, they're strictly analyzing movement.
Yep.
But they're not analyzing really anything very, very static. So we've played around with a couple, and we're in the midst of some partnership deals, so I'll refrain from the company names. But we have some video analysis software that have actually enabled us to break down the angles in setup. So we don't want to look past the points here either, that you can use this to get really great Olympic lift setups. Hugely important. You can use this, and we actually combine this with the Tsunami bar, which is something I'm hoping we'll get to set up. Because the most important part, well, not the most important part, but one of the most important parts, especially in Olympic lift, whether you folks out there are trying to teach the clean, a clean and jerk, a snatch, whatever it is you're trying to teach, one of the most important parts is that setup. Because if your setup's crap, you have no foundation to work off of. So, listen, we can go on all day, so we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to get to some practicals.